You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Well, hello, friends. In this episode, I'm going to introduce you to Kyla Holley. She shares with us the story of how her having gallbladder surgery completely changed her life, and probably not actually exactly in the way that you're thinking it would. Listen, I don't want you to think that this conversation is going to be all sciencey and complicated, because one of the questions I actually ask Kyla is, what is a gallbladder? What does it do? And why would anyone need to have surgery on it? So this is a fascinating story, I think, about how the events in our life can totally change what comes next for us, and sometimes in surprisingly charming and wonderful ways. I think you're going to love it. So let's get started. Kyla Holley, welcome to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm happy you're here. Are you ready for a fun chat?
I will try to be. It's early in the morning here, but I'm certainly looking forward to it.
Very good. I start all my conversations by asking my guests what part of the world they call home. People might be able to guess from your accent, but tell us where you are.
Well, they probably won't be able to guess by the accent because I was born in the UK. I spent half of my life in the UK, and we migrated to Australia just after my second child was born. So 1998, we moved to Australia. So I'm a
Oh,
little bit of an in-betweenie. I when
yeah.
When I go back to the UK, they always say I sound so Australian. And here people say, oh, you haven't lost your accent, have you? So I'm kind of an in-betweenie and always will be probably.
Yes, so I knew you were in Australia, so I would have guessed for that. The accent that I almost always get wrong is the South African accent, which I will put them, depending on how they speak, I will put them in some other country. But for some reason, I never guess South Africa. But and
Hmm.
it's quite the time split between you and I. So I appreciate you making the time for us. In a second, we're going to get to the official interview, but I have one more warm up question. The saying is that laughter is the best medicine. So, what's something that you can count on for bringing a smile to your face or laughter to your day?
Well, I'm going to be really soppy with this one and say my husband, unfortunately, or
Ah, I
fortunately,
love it.
whichever way you look at it. Just because he's kind of my rock. We've been together for how many years? 34 years. And he's just daft. He still makes me laugh. I still make him laugh. We still have a huge amount of fun together,
That's
which I
amazing.
think after that length of time is quite an achievement. It's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of in life is a really solid, happy marriage.
It's something definitely to be very proud of. And I love that there's a root in laughter and joy. That's as
Absolutely.
opposed to grim determination, white knuckling it through a
I'm
lifetime.
sure I'm sure it has been on some occasions, but generally we cruise through pretty well together.
That's really nice. All right. So, the topic of the day, we're going to talk about how your life changed after a surgery. And I'm interested in this story. You and I've had a chance to talk about just other topics before, but you shared a little bit with me on the intake form, but I have a feeling there's a lot more to this story. So, we're talking about gallbladder surgery. My first question is actually about the timetable. How long
Hmm.
ago was this?
This would have been nearly 20 years ago.
All right, 20 years ago. Okay, so now I'm going to ask another question because I did not actually know the answer to this when I started getting ready. I know that you are not, well, I don't think you're a doctor. I'm asking you based on your experience. Tell us what the gallbladder does and then what was the reason for the surgery in your case?
Well, the gallbladder produces bile, and bile is a substance that breaks down fats, basically,
Okay.
in the digestive system. So when you eat something that has a high fat content, the gallbladder produces bile and kind of squirts it into the digestive system to help chemically break down those fats. So that's its
Okay.
purpose. You can live without it. Many people do, but it's useful to have, put it that way.
I actually know somebody who doesn't have one and takes a
Mhm.
supplement on a regular basis, which is the only reason I know this about them. They have a supplement that they take. And so tell us more about what was going on with you that you had this operation. And did you have it removed? Is that the
Yep.
surgery you had? Okay.
Yeah, I did eventually have it removed. The leading up to that point, just to give you a little bit of context, I was in a bit of a rut. I had two young children at the time. I was a little bit directionless in life in that I'd sort of hopped from job to job, and I class myself as intelligent but with a very short attention span.
Okay.
And that meant that as soon as a job bored me, as soon as I felt that I kind of got it and knew what I was doing, I was absolutely mind-numbingly bored in that situation and felt that I couldn't do it anymore. I had to move on. So I'd had a whole series of jobs up to that point, some of them trying to fit in around childcare. And it was just a real mishmash, a directionless sort of life. And also, to put it in context, I didn't know at the time, but I did have an eating disorder.
Okay.
I had binge eating disorder. And I had no knowledge of it. I just thought that I was kind of lazy and lacked willpower, couldn't stick to a diet, and didn't realize that it was actually an eating disorder going on in the background. So this brings me all to a point where one day I started having what I thought were chest pains right in the center of my chest. And it was really pretty bad. I think it was a late on a Saturday night. And I said to my husband, this is not right. You have to take me to hospital. We have to see what this is. So he took me along to the local hospital, and they immediately, of course, with chest pain, they rush you through and hook you up to ICG machines and things like that. And it quickly established that there was nothing wrong with my heart. And then I went to the bottom of the queue.
It's amazing the way that happens. Once they determine that you do not have a heart issue, it's like ordering at a it's like the waitress is never coming back. Like you've moved to
Yeah,
the exact bottom. Go home, come back tomorrow. You're not in danger. It's really bizarre.
absolutely. It was you're not dying out in the waiting room. So we got thrust out into the waiting room. And hours later, I eventually saw a doctor. And the doctor said, well, look, we're going to have to get an ultrasound to confirm this. But educated guess, I would say gallbladder. And up to that point, it was a real bolt out of the blue. I was like, oh, okay. I said, well, how did you come to that diagnosis? And he sort of nodded wisely and he said, let's just say you fit the criteria. So being kind of a nosy person, got straight home and I was like, criteria. I was Googling criteria for diagnosis of gallbladder issues. And it said that doctors look for what they call the five F's. I try and remember them all. Female, 40s, fertile, family history, and the last one was fat. So
Oh,
those are the five F's. And four of them I figured I really can't do much about because
yeah.
it just is. The last one though, the fat one, really shook me because I think up to that point, and I'd only just turned 40, up to that point, I thought that my weight had had no effect on my health, no connection to it. It held me back, not at all. And that really hit me that I thought, okay, this is a thing. This is possibly the first thing that's happened, which is directly connected to my weight. And I have decisions to make about my life going forward, whether to accept who I am, the weight I am, the situation I'm in, what I do day to day, and just say, hey, this is me. I fully accept myself, which would be a lovely place to be. I do advocate for full acceptance of yourself.
Yes.
Um, but at the time, I just thought, oh, is this me? Does this feel like me? Does this look like me? And I decided that no, it didn't. And I really had to take my life back into my own hands and try and resolve a lot of the situation I was in. So I set about doing that. And it took me 2 years from having my gallbladder out to start to study counselling and psychotherapy and
Okay.
apply everything I learned to myself. I was a one person case study. So
Right. Start. We are our own first patient, of course.
absolutely everything I learned that was interesting, I thought, okay, how does this apply to me? So it was quite narcissistic, I suppose, as a study method, but I learned so much. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about human behavior and what sort of prompts a lot of our behaviors and our coping mechanisms. And yeah, it was just absolutely beautiful, that process of first starting to study for initially a diploma. I started off at diploma level, and and then my career took my life took an entire different direction at that point.
So there's layers to this because I think you said that this happened when you were 40.
Yeah,
Early 40s.
yeah.
So this is a shift. You had a previous professional life and you had a family life. And so this is a health situation, but you're going back to school identifying a different skill set at this time. That is really interesting. So I wonder, I have like this random thought as you were going through that, because we are in a place, at least in the United States, where we're like renaming things to be more inclusive in many, many good ways. And one of the things is there's been a big push for body positivity and size awareness and all of those wonderful things. Big fan.
Mhm.
I wonder if you went back and saw the same doctor today, if he would use the same words with the F for fat. As you said, I was like, gosh, I wonder if they would still say that. Like, I just have no idea. Like, or whether it's been retooled to be something that is a more generalist list, because it can be a judgment. It can be a tough conversation, is I guess what I'll say, between medical professionals and individuals about body size and judgment. So the gallbladder surgery happened was sort of quickly, and then it was 2 years of studying and healing. All right.
Mhm.
So after the surgery, you're in doing this research. You're going back to school. You lose 90 pounds.
I think that's what it is.
That's
Yes,
well, I got that.
it was
Yeah.
about 40 kilos.
That's an enormous amount of weight. That's an enormous amount. It's an enormous amount of weight to carry, right? That's an enormous amount of weight to carry on
It
your
is.
body. And I actually wrote it in my question to give you a gold star for converting from kilos to pounds for my imperial measurement audience over here. So let's talk a little bit about well, you mentioned it. You started it that you had been okay with your body size up until you had to face it from a medical perspective. Was there anything that you were going through as a mom of young kids, like as somebody who is in their 40s, we call that midlife now? Like what were your thoughts and feelings? Like how did you go through that process of evaluating, is this what I want to look like? Is this what I want to do?
Well, it's incorrect to say I was happy up to that point. I really
Okay.
wasn't.
Okay.
Um, because I think the health question really shifted and forced me. It was a catalyst for change. But up to that point, I really wasn't happy. I wasn't in the body that I felt matched my personality. It didn't match who I believed I was on the inside. And I just aspired to have a body that matched that. So this wasn't really a quest for thinness. I wouldn't put myself into that category even now, but it was just a quest for the inside and the outside to match.
Okay.
So
And
I
can I
could have
ask
that
a
level of
follow-up?
comfort.
Can I ask a
Sure.
follow-up? So this happened when you were 40. Is this something, a mismatch that would go back all the way to like your teenage years, or is this because of a change in body size that happened as a result of like becoming a parent and going through your 30s?
It goes back to about being 18, I
Okay.
suppose. That's when I really started to gain weight, 17, 18. And and my weight sort of progressively grew in my 30s, probably. But only a little bit, only a couple of kilos a year, which doesn't sound a lot. That can
Yeah.
come on very, very easily. But when you kind of add up a decade of 2 kilos a year, suddenly it's a reasonably substantial amount of weight. And it was just creeping on and on and on and on and on. Because, as I say, I had binge eating disorder. I had no
Yeah.
idea at the
Yeah.
time.
And so, all right. So I'm talking to Kyla about how her life changed as a result of this surgery and she lost a lot of weight and all of these things. I want to take a minute and invite all of the people who are watching and listening to join us in the conversation. If you're interested in this topic, I post a discussion question on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We'd love to have you there. I'll be there in the comments. Kyla will hopefully pop in and be there. If you don't, already follow the show on social media, of course, the links are in the show notes. All right. So back to talking about this. You go back to school, you study, you're getting a diploma in psychology, it sounds like.
In counselling, actually,
Counseling. Okay, in
yeah,
counseling. In
yeah.
counseling. And at some point, a couple of things happen. At some point, you realize that you have a binge eating disorder. And also, at some point, you talk to the person who did your surgery and say you want to work with people who are his clients and support them through weight loss or bariatric surgery. So I'm curious where
Mhm.
those two things come together, how those two things happen.
Well, he took my gallbladder out, the
He took your
surgeon.
gall. Yeah, well, that part I knew, but I'm trying to think of any time I've called like a doctor back and been like, "Hey, let me help you." So I'm trying to figure out what that bridge is. Like, how did that
Okay.
happen?
That was just a leap of faith. That was just me being, I suppose, blindly positive and thinking, hey, what's the worst that could happen here? But I realized I got my diploma, which was my first qualification. I went on then to get a couple of degrees after that. But initially I started at diploma level and I started looking for work and realizing the transformation that I had been through personally and how I always knew with food, it wasn't the food. We kind of go into relationships with food with this idea, I just have to eat less and exercise more. Ka-ching, the moment will happen immediately that I do those two
Yes.
things. The truth is, for a lot of people, it isn't that simple. There's a lot of complexity. And I think I'd gotten to the stage where I really started to understand the complexity behind weight loss. So I approached the surgeon because I had found out in the meantime that he did bariatric surgery locally. And I thought, well, there's a whole load of people who are going for surgical options and non-surgical options as well, without really having a look at their entire relationship with food, reassessing past trauma, reassessing how their relationship with food works. And so I approached him. I wrote an 8-page, what was the equivalent of a paper, basically, on why he needed that sort of support for his patients. Because I thought, he's a doctor. I can't just breeze in there and go, hey, look at me. I'm going to have to go in with something a bit more scientific. So I did. I wrote this paper and I delivered it to him and I said, please think about this. Didn't hear from him for about a month, I think. And then he said, look, come in for a chat. And I went in and saw him. And he said, well, look, let's give this a trial. And that was, I think, 16 or 17 years ago. And I've stayed with him ever since, basically. So
That is such a spectacular story. It really speaks to like, taking your chance and asking for the thing that you want. How long after, how far into your academic change and after the surgery did you initiate this conversation with the surgeon?
it was as soon as I got my diploma, actually. So it was 2 years after my own surgery.
2 years
And
after your own surgery.
yeah,
And so one of the things that the dots that I was trying to connect was because you had gallbladder surgery, but you really reached out to him about bariatric surgery. And so bariatric surgery, the way I think of it is primarily a weight loss intervention, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So then that's that. So, and you were working with those folks. So, when did you begin to study eating disorders?
It was the realization that some of the people that he was sending to me were presenting with behaviors that, in the limited study I had done, I kind of thought, well, this sounds disordered. This perhaps is an eating disorder, and I don't know enough about this subject. So by this time, I had done a degree. I'd updated my diploma into a degree. And it was that realization that I really needed some specialist knowledge, particularly in eating disorders. And at the time in Australia, there really wasn't much available,
Okay.
but not as far as a comprehensive approach to eating disorders. There were courses that dealt with the recognition of them, but didn't really tell you to do what to do afterwards. You know, yes, okay, I recognize this person has bulimia. Now what? What do I do with these people? And what I was seeking was a much more comprehensive approach. And I actually found it back in the UK, back where I
Okay.
come from, with the National Centre for Eating Disorders over there, who I spent another 3 years doing their master practitioner program over there, which taught me about eating disorders, nutrition, treatment of obesity, which is a word, like you were saying before, we don't say obesity anymore, but at
Yeah.
the time, that's how it was worded. And it was a really rounded education about not only the recognition of all these things, but the treatment methodology behind all of them as well. So it was, as I say, 3 years of going back and forth to the UK to study, but it really, for me, completed my education and led me down this road that I never expected to be on. This found me. I didn't find it.
100%. I mean, there is sort of I don't know what we would call it, a colloquialism, a phrase. There's this concept that, like, we seek out knowledge for the things that impact us. So there's a joke that, people who are studying psychology have questions about themselves or somebody in their family.
Absolutely.
Within the medical profession, you often find that somebody is deeply passionate because of some personal connection to things like that. So that is definitely. And then within the coaching space, often people will say, you go there because you're seeking answers for yourself. And for you, there's a variety of layers of this. Like, so part of it is you had a medical intervention for a critical thing with your gallbladder. And then also you were curious, which you turned into advanced studies on that topic. It's really a layered pattern here with what you did. So it would no conversation in 2025 about weight and eating would be complete without at least a nod to the fact that, at least in the United States in the last 2 years, there's been a very big shift in medical intervention, which are the new medications. So Ozempic, these are, I don't know if they have completely different names in Australia, but Ozempic, tirzepatide, the GLP-1s that
Hmm.
are massively popular and much less invasive in some ways than, well, I guess in all ways, than bariatric surgery, which is a major operation, but have also interestingly pushed to the forefront the conversation that you started with at the beginning, which is that this is a much more complicated thing going on for people than it has been treated for such a long time, where the instructions were just eat less. And people are like, yes, we know. We know
Exactly.
that we're supposed to choose the apple and not the Dorito. It's not working.
Uh-huh.
What have you seen? Are you experiencing, like, is it as popular? I mean, I guess you have no idea. Like, is it popular in Australia? Are people looking to these medications and these prescriptions for intervention?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we, interestingly enough, the last international conference I went on, which was last September, I believe, it was an international conference for bariatric surgery. And pretty much every presentation concentrated on these GLP-1 agonists and how to use
Really?
them in conjunction with surgery, instead of surgery, what's happening in the industry. It was huge, absolutely huge. So
It's
yes,
yeah, and one of the things that I think is so interesting about, and I am not an expert and I don't even actually have personal experience, so this is just completely anecdotal, is that several months ago there began to be a wave of press where people were talking about how they experienced it took away what they were calling food noise for the people who
yeah,
were taking it, and it just was such an interesting conversation to see like not small amounts of people, hundreds of thousands of people with such gratitude for the change in their current situation, facing what is like a complete almost disbelief from the medical community who had been saying that wasn't there. Like we didn't know you had this. And as an observer, I was like, wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
But as somebody who's in the industry, that may not have surprised you to hear that people were really struggling with what we're calling now food noise.
Oh, absolutely not. And it doesn't surprise me that a lot of people are leaping into the GLP-1 agonist solution. It worried, I think, the surgical sector at first because we all
Sure.
thought, oh, okay, is this the end of bariatric surgery? But very quickly, we did notice a little bit of a downturn, I suppose, in referrals for a little while. But again, that's all shifted back now because a lot of people are trying them as a sort of a last ditch attempt to lose the weight by other means.
Sure.
They're realizing that it's not the solution for them, and then they're coming back to the
Oh,
surgical options. So
interesting.
we have noticed a turnaround.
That is really interesting. I hadn't heard that. One thing that I think mirrors it as an observer is that the conversation that you mentioned that took you to your surgeon and said, I think that your patients would really benefit from counseling on their relationship with food. And I had heard that over the years, definitely in making a decision on a major surgery. And I still hear it with people talking about these medications. Like this is a medication. It doesn't, you will be better off if you look at your relationship with food. So do you see that the issues, that the work that you do still has value for people who are going through this process either way?
Absolutely. And I do think because the thing with all the medications is that they work while you're on them.
Yeah,
And as humans, if we invest in something, because they are quite a financial investment.
quite expensive.
Oh, I don't know quite how it works over there, but over here they're reasonably expensive. And generally, behaviorally, if we invest in something, either financially or giving our time, and we get a big reward, then we're willing to continue that behavior. The reward reinforces the behavior. When it gets to a stage where you still have to keep paying, but the reward has diminished. So, in other words, when you've lost the weight, but you're still having to pay for this medical solution and there's no reward anymore, that's when people go, well, hold on now. I'm
Right.
Why am I still doing this? And they believe that they can just come off the medication now that they're much smaller and just continue. But what happens is the hunger comes back, the food noise comes back, and quite often, quite aggressively comes back. And
Yeah.
people suddenly realize, whoa, I'm on a roller coaster of weight gain all of a sudden, because the body's natural defense is to replace the weight that it's lost. So suddenly people realize that, hold on, I do have to keep paying forever for these medications. And if you are, I don't know, in your 30s or even 40s, the prospect of paying forever for that medication suddenly gets very expensive. And then
Yeah.
you weigh up the cost of surgery, which is hopefully a permanent solution, against the cost of ongoing medication for the rest of your life. And suddenly the surgery seems like a bargain. And people kind of go, oh, okay, I made a mistake here.
I had not thought of it that way. That is very interesting. I had the conversation with just friends about the it's forever. Forever is so hard to understand at any given point. So when somebody says, you're going to take this medication forever, or you're going to be married forever, and I did an interview earlier today about somebody who got married in their 20s and said, I didn't understand what forever would be. And I was like, no, I don't think you can. I mean, at any point, I don't know if you can. It's just a really tough concept, but then that's true. Like later on, you're doing the cost benefit analysis for yourself. And I think it also happens in other medications where they feel better and they're like, well, obviously I'm cured. I don't now need my allergy medication. I'll just stop. And then they run into a cat and they're like, no, nope, still allergic. Moving on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As it works out, I wasn't cured. The medicine was working.
Exactly. But I do think that there is a real chance for people on the medications if they also take the time to, once that food noise is gone, once they're
Oh,
in
yeah.
a place where they feel that they have an element of control over the relationship with food, if they take the opportunity then to learn,
Yeah.
uh, then there's a possibility they can come out the other side and wean themselves off the medication with much more knowledge around their relationship with food.
And
I do think that's
medication.
possible.
Yeah, and that's not my area of expertise, but I would say that it seems logical and commonsensical, which is not a real word, that working on your relationship with food and empowering yourself in that way has benefits outside of weight loss or anything, because it's such a big part of the human experience and how we live our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
something that is fundamental. We have to eat. It's not as easy as saying, well, I will distract myself forever from food. Food is everywhere. And
Yeah.
and it's far more beneficial to learn how to live comfortably in that environment than it is to find ways to reject the environment because you're never really going to be successful in doing so.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's unique about your perspective, or advantageous, or nice and supportive, is that you're doing counseling about relationship with food from the starting point of we support medical interventions. Like this is a judgment-free, safe space. We're talking about relationship with food without saying that one way of doing this is better than another way.
Absolutely. And I see a whole variety. Some people want no intervention. They literally just want to see me and sometimes see a dietitian as well. I work very closely with dietitians. And sometimes they don't want any medication, any surgery. They just want that natural approach.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine. But you're right, there's no judgment for anybody that decides that another option would suit them better.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's good. So you, at one point, did you self-diagnose yourself with the binge condition, or did you work with somebody else who confirmed it for you?
It was a self-diagnosis and it came crazy late in the picture because by this time I'd set up the Australian Centre for Eating Behaviour. I was teaching other health professionals about eating disorders in Australia, and we trained well over 1,000 other health professionals to date. And I was in a training room, as I had been many, many times, and one of the delegates on the course said, out of interest, Kyla, have you ever had an eating disorder? And I said, no, I haven't. And the conversation continued. And it wasn't really until later I got back to my hotel room and I don't know how it hit me, but I suddenly thought, you idiot. Of course you had an eating disorder. And it was one of those real light bulb moments that I thought, how have I missed this? How in everything I know, how did I miss the fact that I had an eating disorder? And it was so obvious to me after I realized, but I'd just never gone back and really reviewed my own behavior back then to realize that yes, I did have binge eating disorder. And I had, during the course of my studies, basically counseled myself out of that eating disorder. It was, yeah, it was one of those things that you don't realize about yourself. You're often the last person to know in those situations.
We are. We're terrible. We are our own best observer because we are the only person who knows this, but at the same time, it's hard to see what we're doing for ourselves. And then it sounds like you are a person that when you are studying something, you run yourself through that filter, like, oh, maybe I should try this for myself. And so you work through it that way. I tend to do that with many, many things. Like if I read a recipe, I'm likely to try it. If I read about a new thing, I often have to be talked out of it. I'm like, sure, let's try this new theory. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
All right. So you study the eating disorders, you form the Australian Centre for Eating Behaviour. In a minute, we're going to do the final questions. You have a podcast. I would love to give you a chance to tell people how they can look up the Australian Centre for Eating Behaviour and your podcast, which is called Change Your Relationship with Food.
Well, the podcast is on every podcast platform. So you just have to look up Change Your Relationship with Food with Kyla Holley, and
Very
you will
good.
find me somewhere.
Very nice. Very nice. And the Australian Centre for Eating Behaviour is probably the same thing. Just look at the name.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
just Google the name and you will find us. And we offer a whole list of health professionals all over the world, actually, that have studied with us now with the advent of online learning, who have done a course with us and are able to help you if you have an eating disorder or a weight concern.
That's another wonderful thing about being alive in 2025 that if you have something, if you're in a situation where you regionally do not find people who specialize in a type of care, the internet has opened up an entire just smorgasbord of options for better or worse. We can now reach around the globe for support. All right, Kyla, are you ready for the final fun questions?
Ah, okay.
People get people get nervous about this, but these are just silly. Don't be nervous. They're just for fun. All right. So I try
Okay.
to make these unrelated to the topic, but the first one I didn't follow my own rule. On your birthday, what's a sweet treat or dessert that you would like to have with friends and family?
Ooh, there's something called princess cake. I
Princess
don't know.
cake. I
It's
don't know what that
it's
is.
It's Swedish. And when I lived over in Perth in Western Australia, there was a chain of shops over there that sold Swedish baked goods. And princess cake is delicious. It's marzipan, it's sponge, it's cream, it's just heaven on a plate. But
All right.
unfortunately, they don't have that where I live now. So it's the first thing that sprung to mind.
That's delightful. I love that answer. All right, so this is going to be a fun question because we live in different countries. What is a recent TV show or movie that you have enjoyed that you can share with the audience?
Ah, I'm late to the party with this one. It's a British program called Gavin and Stacey,
Gavin
and
and Stacey.
it's actually finished now. It ran for 17 years on and off, I believe, and and I knew of it but had never watched an episode. And it was only last week I thought, people talk about this, and I started watching and couldn't stop, and I've seen the whole thing.
I love it. I have decided that that's my favorite way to watch shows. I do not want to, I prefer if it's going to run for a year or a season, I want to wait until they're all out and be able to watch the full season. Or I'd love to watch so I can just go through, 5 years or whatever it is and really get the whole. I'm completely out of practice of once a week, wait until the next year. Drives me bananas. So I'm all in for the binging. Okay. Last one. If you won a $5,000 gift card, let's pretend, but you have to
Mhm.
spend it today. You have to spend it on yourself and you have to spend it all in one place. It can be a real store, like a brick and mortar store, or an online shop. Where are you going to go to spend this money?
I would say a kitchen shop.
Wow.
Because I need a new kitchen, and it's something that is not a cheap project. So we've been renovating our house for 5 years, and we keep pushing the kitchen to the last place because we know it's going to be the big ticket item. So with $5,000, I would probably buy myself A cooker. That
Okay.
sounds kind of boring, doesn't it? A holiday to Tahiti might be better, but a cooker.
No, I think that if you work in like I spend a lot of time in the kitchen and I love having the right things, and so I mean I will say this way. By spending $5,000 on a new, range or oven or even a refrigerator or the world's greatest ice maker, right? That's so much more fun than like a washing machine or new tires for the car or like a lawnmower. Like nobody wants no, well, that's not true. Some people will be like, you got to see my new lawnmower. But like nobody's like, oh my God, I can't wait to show you my new, car repair that I just had to spend $7,000. Wait till you see my
Exactly.
new dryer.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
a new kitchen would make me a happy woman. I've got
oh,
big plans in my head. I just need them to transfer into reality.
that's a speak it into existence. That was what we do. That's it, Kyla Holley. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest today on the show.
Beautiful. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself, head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adultier adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.